This is in Convos with Danae. It's a space for exploring life's questions through introspection, intellect, investigation, insight, while finding inspiration. Here's to growth and change. Now, let's go in. And here we are. So, episode 2 is painful humor and motivation, or serious ting, make joke. I want to read this quote for you. To understand social systems, we must study the practical action of people's daily lives as well as the metaphor in which they express it. This was written by Robert Murphy in Dialectics of Social Life. Let's talk about some daily life stuff. Jamaica, where I come from, we take serious thing, make joke. We use joke for everything. Let me give you an example. We use joke to describe your attire. If somebody, for instance, was having a pants that was a little bit shorter or didn't quite reach the ankle, we would say, "Ha, you take a measurement in a water," or we would call them flood pants. We have riddles. Oh boy, did we have riddles. We used to have a show on radio, actually, called Quenchade Guess the Riddle. And it was the most humorous riddles to try to figure out. And one that always stood in my mind, I don't know why it stood in my mind, but this one was called, my father have a donkey and him ride it by the tail. My father has a horse, which he rides by the tail. And it took us a while to figure it out. But it was a pipe. The father smoked a pipe. You know what I mean? Those are the things. We would use jokes, humor, to describe illnesses. This is like, we go into the pits on this one. So, for instance, we would say stuff like, "You favor marasme pitney." And that is actually, marasme is our patois version of the word marasmus. You should look that up. It is a dietary, like a condition where you are actually malnourished. Yes. Or, you know, in the case, my aunt, she just came back from dealing with cancer, fighting cancer, battling cancer. And she had to do a mastectomy. You know one nickname that she got? She was called Wani. We do some weird stuff with that one to describe illness. And I'm not guiltless, you know, like me telling you about my culture. Know that sometimes I was an active participant in said culture. And what do I mean by that? I think most of my exes have a nickname. Don't tell them, and I won't tell you some of them because you might know them and go and call them by the name. But I have participated in this. And of course, we have like general nicknames. Some of them are good. You know, if you are a sprinter, they might call you Speedy. And in my case, I had names that were descriptors, not necessarily fun names. So let me go down the list. I was called Bucky or Buffy, to respond to what appeared to be me having buck tooth or buff tooth. So those are my names. I was also called Bulby. I'm going to take off my glasses for you. I was called Bulby because of the size of my eyes, and they were likened to stadium bulbs. I don't know if you know what a stadium bulb looks like, but I don't think my eyes look like that, but that was one of my nicknames. I was called Bulby. And then, of course, there were ones that didn't stick, like forehead, because apparently my forehead was big at the time, or gums, because I had swollen gums. All the gamut I have experienced. And there are ways to deal with these things, right? Now, around the world, nicknames are not strange. In fact, they're commonplace. And anthropologists, social anthropologists, talk about this. So around the world, we have nicknames or pet names, and they're used to do different things. One, they can give a quality. So in relationships, couples will go, "Hey, sweetie, sweets," or they might give another name depending on the relationship. I don't want to get involved. Or nicknames can come from an incident, something that has happened to you, or something that made people affiliate you with the incident. So I'll give you an example with also another example. So my friend, his name is Owen Ellis, and his stage name was Blacker. And he'll give you the story. He was a darker hue in his class, and they decided that he was blacker than other people in the class, and hence his name Blacker. And he's had that name for over 30 years, I would say. He tells a joke about how insidious nicknaming is in Jamaican culture. We will use it to describe people in like obvious ways, but uncouth. So one example he gives is a gentleman who had an incident or a deformity caused by an incident, and he has one hand that was shorter than his other hand. His nickname was Clock. I kid you not. Or around the world, nicknames can be used as a verbal analogy. So in Japan, they will transpose your name to do an analogy. One of the psychologists who was studying this in Japan, her name was Marlene, and they transposed her name to say Majain or Margarine. You decide why. It's also about physical attributes. So somebody who is tall is called tall. In Jamaica, we'd call them tally, tall man. Somebody who is slender, we might call them slim. And somebody who is heavy set, bigger, obese, we'll call them fat or fatty. And then, of course, in extremes in Jamaica, because we like extremes, there was this kid when I was in high school, taking the bus in high school. I remember his friends, when he got on the bus, they would be like, "Yo, Boomage, come." And I'd be like, "Boomage." And it was because he was very heavy set, and they were basically likening him to a bomb. So in Jamaican parlance, bomb is boom. And so they're basically saying when he steps, or if he were to fall, it would be boomage. It would be a bomb going off. Yeah, I'm telling you, we were intense. And sometimes we are affiliated with animals or associations. So somebody who is petite might be called mosquito, or somebody who in Jamaica we consider to not look good or is ugly. We say, boy, them have a patu. Listen, if you have a chance, Google what is a patu. Then there's also, across the world, we will incorporate folk tales or popular characters or animations. So sometimes we'll see people whose names, for instance, is Donald. Donalds might be called Donald Duck, just from the affiliation or association with the character Donald Duck. And then we also do rhyming across the globe. We do rhyming. So if your name is Harris, we might call you Paris. We also add suffixes. So an aunt will become an auntie or auntie. We put on the IE on the name. And last but not least, we'll do abbreviations. So I had somebody who used to call me Dan, and my name is Danae. Or somebody who's Danielle could be called Dan, or somebody who's Danny could be called Dan. So we do that with nicknames. It is not strange. Anthropologists say nicknames and teasing are somewhat like a rite of passage. And I'm telling you, I don't know anybody who is unscathed in Jamaica. I think everybody had one. And other countries do this in the Caribbean as well, and we hear it coming across in cultural art forms. So in Kaiso and Calypso, we have the pecan. And that is from, other islands of the Caribbean. The pick-on is, you tease or you make jokes within the lyrics. In hip-hop, you will have a diss track. Different, artists are dissing the others. Everybody goes after Drake or Kanye. You know the stories. And of course, in other ways, it shows up, like in Jamaica, we had clash. We had clash in the dancehall scene. And, the famous or popular clashes were like with Ninja Man, the original front teeth, gold teeth, Dan Gargan. When he goes on stage, we know it's going to be a border clash. And there was even a song called Border Clash. So it shows up in different ways. What, however, is interesting to me is what one of the anthropologists, Radcliffe Brown, says. Teasing, he says, is always a compound of friendliness and antagonism. And we have to deal with that, And how do we respond? So as a kid, you grow up thinking, I either fight it or accept it. And psychologists will tell you that children will show you, if they know the word is negative, if they know the nickname is a bad connotation, they will react viscerally to it. They will not answer you, or they will call the person giving them a name. They will fight it if they can. And in my case, I did the accept route. The code on the street, the code on the playground is don't fight it. If you fight the nickname, it will stick and it will become relentless. If you don't fight it, all of a sudden the sting gets less. And so, that's why I could list at least 4 or 5 names that I had, because none of them would stick. Because you just have to keep moving. You can't stick the name with a name, right? Or can you? So we look at this and we talk about nicknames as signifying belonging. It shows you are one of the group or you're not. In indigenous cultures, they will say they give names based on what a person is seen as or is judged by others. So what if you don't wish to belong to the group they're putting you in? What if the group is stigmatized? What if? I want to go into this a little bit more with you. This is almost emotional for me every time I think about it. I used to work, this is adult now, I used to work in the bank in Jamaica as a teller. And I had a supervisor who made me very aware of a certain word, ghetto, and particularly ghetto girl. Give you a little context. I was trained at and worked at a branch that was near my home. And this branch was, in the hood. And to get to this branch, I used to take one bus, direct route. I'd walk through the hood. It would take me about 10 minutes tops to get to the bus stop. Take the bus one way. 10 minutes, I'm at work. I cannot be late for work because it was such a convenience. One day I'm in the lunchroom and this supervisor, apparently she had been observing me and she saw when I came off the bus one of the mornings. So I'm in the lunchroom one day and she's like, hey, you, where you live? I'm like, I live at so-and-so. She's like, really? You live in the ghetto? So how did you get this job? How did they hire you? I'm confused. How did you get this job? I was silenced. I didn't have a quip, I didn't have a comeback. I didn't have a witty exchange. I literally froze for a moment. And to kind of get out of it, I said, yeah, I take the bus to work. And I bolted out of it. I just had to get out of that room. I had no quip for it. This ghetto girl word comes back later to haunt me. I'm in a relationship here in Canada, a good 7 years after this incident. And I'm having a conversation with my then boyfriend, and he says to me, "Oh, I see you're upset. I don't want trouble you, because you want to get a girl, and I don't want you to fight me." It's like, excuse me? Say what? Me fight you? So there was an affiliation with this ghetto girl that has come back to haunt me. And throughout the years, people have alluded to and touched on and hinted on this word. You can either lean into it and be proud, or you can seek to run around and be afraid of it. But I'm telling you, it has an impact. And anthropologists talk about this as, in the context of the name giver. The name giver, they say, assumes a role of power in the group or in the setting or in the community. The name giver is the land of bullies. Bullies love that position. Because you see, names connote a deviation from the usual, and thus they can separate those who are in the group and those who are out of the group. And that is exactly what my supervisor was doing to me. When I think about it, this naming and nicknaming and teasing and jeering, yes, it was humor, and yes, people may have said things with good intentions and maybe not poor intentions, and not all nicknames were negative. Some of them are very positive and refreshing. But I have to reflect on it, in terms of what impact does it have in your formative years. And child psychologists talk about this. Marlene Ritchie says, a nickname reflects how others view the person named and comes to mirror how the person sees himself or herself. Nicknames can affect a child's self-esteem positively or negatively. Recently, I saw a video circulating on my Instagram, and it was humorous, but it triggered me again on this topic. Like, I wrote this topic down a year ago, and it is so interesting how many things have been coming at me since I've decided that this would be episode 2. And this video is one of them. A little boy was playing with a garden hose and just messing up the place and wetting up the place. And his father, who sounds like a Caribbean father, could be a Jamaican father, was saying, "Stop it, you doctor, you. Stop it, you engineer, you. Behave yourself, you little engineer." And I had a moment, because I'm like, imagine if we took the time to pour into children from that stage. That child was no more than 3. And can you imagine if we had taken the time to pour into him from that stage of his life? Imagine the impact. I mean, for all of us, if that was what was happening. I want to leave us with a reflection on all of the things that I talked about so far. This is a big topic for me, and I want us to consider that this power that is yielded by the name giver is also partnering with ridicule. They are bedfellows. And this impacts more than you know. In my case, it impacts what I share with people and with whom I share. You can ask anybody. I am very reticent to give you my address. In fact, if I see the word address on a form, I have a moment. Even here in Canada, where I'm not in a hood, I don't live in a hood, and we can talk about this at another time, but I don't think there are any real hoods here. But even here, when I see the word address, I have a moment. And I think about the song that Etana, the artist, the strong one, she sings a song called Wrong Address. You can't tell me she didn't know my stories. You can't tell me she wasn't speaking for people like me who grew up in areas that were stigmatized. Every time I hear her perform that song live, I have goosebumps. I tear up, because it has such an impact. I had a chance to tell her that once. It really has such an impact, that word address. It also made me guarded. So as much as I talk a lot here, and as much as this podcast is going to go in, and the first season is going in on me and personal, There are many things you will not know. I'm still guarded in many ways. It also motivated me. Some people might call it negative motivation. But you see that incident in the bank? Let me tell you what it did. In the bank, you are graded. Like you have like a performance scale every month in the bank. And I was hell-bent after that conversation with my supervisor that I would have a 100% average. Let me tell you how serious that was for me. I would not be out. That we call it being out. That is your balance is short. You come up short at the end of a work day and you have to find this difference. I would make sure I wouldn't ever be short, because her intimation, her connotation was that I come from the ghetto working in a bank. I would probably be a robber. I was something negative, and I was hell-bent on proving her wrong. But it had such a weight on me. I remember one day at this branch, I was out, and I literally went home and dreamed about it. I dreamed every single transaction I did that day. And this is a busy branch. And I went home and I literally was going through every transaction like a Rolodex. And I found my difference. That's how hell-bent I was on not being what she was trying to put on me, to ascribe to me. Nicknames also made me a joker. I wish I could, share with you stories from some of my friends, growing up as a kid to now. They'll tell you that I have always been a big joker. I was a joker in class. I wasn't a class clown. I paid attention and did my work sometimes, but I was also a joker. And to this day, I still try to find the humor. I try to disarm. I try to distract with humor. I still do it. These are some of the impacts that this experience with nicknaming, with teasing, with what I'm calling painful humor has had on me. Now I look forward to hearing from you. Tell me, did you have a nickname? How did you respond to that nickname? Have you ever traced, back to forward, how this impacted your life, the decisions you've made, and so on? I'm curious. Share with me, and let's continue to go in.